Let's look at the technique of painting from a palette with watercolor pencils. So the very first part of this is that we have to create our own palette first. We'll use it just like watercolors after that. So I'm going to be using Carmine, dark green, and violet, a little bit different from the first example on the left. The idea is to lay down a heavy patch of color, and it can be on the same page or completely different page. I usually like to have a small piece of scrap paper that I can shift around for convenience. So I'm going to be using the violet this time around. I decided the blue was a little too blue for that example. And we're going to kind of follow the same basic idea, creating our big form and working inwards. All right, so I remembered, luckily, that the first time around I needed to have more red. All right, let's get started. I'm dissolving the Carmine color with my water brush. And you see, look at that, just like watercolor paint. So I'm starting, this is what works for me. I'm starting with my big shape, and I'm going to preserve my highlight. And often I will leave a little more than I think I need, and then sort of work my way in. So once again, we're just pushing and pulling paint around on the surface. If you need to wipe away excess, you can. Colors will continue to mingle and flow as long as it's wet. I'm going to add a little bit of the violet, not too much. And even though this is still quite a wet wash, I thought I'd give it a try. So you can see here, I tried to sort of blend that in, but look what's happening. So I'm picking up some color with my brush. So I'm going to leave that alone for now. Let's work on painting the stem. So I want to start with the least water possible in my brush for this. I'm going to be creating a fine line. So I want a dark pigment, so I'm grabbing a lot of color with a small amount of water. The trick to these fine lines is to start with a dry brush and just use a feather touch with that brush. You know, as you press down, you'll create a thicker line. As you lift up, you'll get a thinner line. So now I am adding a little bit along the base of that stem, but here's what's happening. Because the wash is still wet, there's just a tiny bit of bleeding. So there you have it. It's very simple to create a little watercolor painting with a palette using your watercolor pencils.